All right, folks, here we go with the notes for Chapter 8, talking about computer-driven technology. And we start off this chapter with talking a bit about the device to which we are using, the computer itself. Some of this for some of you may be review. Some of it may help clarify some terms for some of you. So let's get into it. The difference between hardware and software. Hardware is any of the physical stuff of the computer. It's the computer itself. It's the keyboard. It's the mouse. It's the microphone. It's the screen. It's all the things that you can physically touch. Also includes all the stuff that's inside the computer, the guts. We're talking about the hard drive, the RAM, the motherboard, the processor, all those sorts of things. All of that is hardware. Software are the programs used to make the computer perform particular tasks. That's your operating system. That's the BIOS to which the computer, all that information that you see when the computer first turns on before it gets into the operating system. It's also the particular programs that you use, from Adobe Audition to the Microsoft Office suite to all that stuff. That's all software, okay? Computers operate digitally, makes sense. They work by sequencing large strings of on and off pulses. If you've heard the term binary, ones and zeros, one being on, zero being off, that's the language that computers tend to speak. That's how they know what sort of processes and calculations to do and what sort of things to bring up onto your screen. CPUs, central processing units, these are the brains of the computer. They perform the on and off tasks. It's the manipulation of digits that makes the calculations. All of those sorts of things. That's what the CPU does. It's the mind of the computer that makes the computer do all the things that we hope that it will do with a certain amount of competence. The computer stores and retrieves information from a program in random access memory. That's called RAM for short. The information in RAM stays there only as long as the computer is turned on. So this is the stuff that does not help the computer to kind of turn on, and it knows those processes automatically. So that's why if you're working on your computer and you turn it off without saving stuff, or somehow you lose power, all that stuff that you was working on in any of the particular software programs, the data that you were inputting, all that sort of thing, that pretty much just goes away if it has not been saved. Computers are equipped with storage mechanisms, usually in the configuration of a device for writing information on a hard disk. And when we're talking about a disk here, we can talk either about a mechanical hard drive or on a solid state drive. So these things are what holds that data that you do save for whenever you do walk away from the computer, turn it off, turn it back on. Many mobile devices and netbooks now use flash memory. This functions as RAM and storage together. It has an advantage over hard drives because it can read and write instantaneously. These are kinds of memory that don't require a lot of mechanics and extra processes and that sort of thing. So if you have one of those computers with that sort of a hard drive, quote unquote, that's why certain things may take a shorter amount of time to be able to call up or to save and that sort of thing. The other type of memory in the computer is the read-only memory, the ROM memory. This is the stuff that tells the computer what to do at boot up. If you've ever gone into your BIOS settings at the beginning of the computer, it tells it what sort of things to look for in the beginning, and has all the stuff that the computer knows what to do. You know, first thing you turn it on. That is the stuff that is saved in the ROM memory. Unless you are a supercomputer geek, you're not going to be able to change what's going on in ROM, and that is by design. Computer-generated effects. Computers can be connected to a large variety of keyboards and synthesizers using MIDI. That's short for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And this is something that a lot of musicians will use, how they connect some of their instruments to computers and are able to create various types of digital musical recordings. And these synthesizers, when they're connected, they can produce realistic sounds. They combine many different tone and frequency generators together. Each generator in this process is called a voice, and synthesizers can use them to produce virtual instruments. A little bit outside the scope of what we tend to do in radio production, but it's an interesting thing to keep in mind because it can be used to create music. And if you really get into some big production studios, you may see some of these things, and that's how they generate their own music and their own sound effects many times. A synthesizer that can simultaneously play several voices that sound like different instruments and allow you to control those voices separately is called multi-timbral. So those are some pretty elaborate setups that you would see if you encounter them. A sequencer is a device that enables you to record different channels of MIDI information into some kind of memory device, such as a hard drive. So, again, if you are into the musical side of things, you may find some of this interesting. Let's move on to computer-assisted editing. Modern software allows you to use non-destructive editing. Now, keep in mind, when we talk about non-destructive editing, we are talking about trying to do editing and saving things in such a way that we still have the original files that we've worked with and can go back to that in some way, shape, or form. So there's no risk of losing or damaging the original audio material, because the process that takes place on the screen can be reversed without damage to that original sound file. The operator can repeat the process again and again until a satisfactory edit is achieved. As we've said in an earlier class, early in the semester, for our purposes, Control-Z is your friend. That allows you to undo anything that you either made a mistake on or didn't like the way that something came out, and allows you to go back to what had happened before you made the edit. Digital audio workstation software allows for the ability to remove unwanted noise. That's a feature called noise reduction. Some software programs also allow for the removal of pops, clicks, and audio hums as well. For those of you that are looking to do advanced audio editing with some of the more elaborate sorts of equipment for things that you might be able to do on Pro Tools, there's a good section in your textbook that you can take a look at and do a little bit of a deep dive there. Some modern audio consoles are digitally programmed to be able to be connected with other consoles and use audio sources from several locations. We talked about this somewhat when we talked about digital consoles versus analog consoles and how they can be networked between different studios to allow sources from one studio to be utilized in another. And some digital consoles use computer software to recall particular settings. This allows you to set up the console for a specific purpose using specific settings. And again, this is basically it would be the sort of thing where if you had specific purposes for a particular type of broadcast or a particular type of performance that was going on, and you were going to use certain settings all the time, instead of having to configure those settings every time you went into the studio, you could have that pre-programmed in, call it up, and have everything set the way that you want it. At this point, we'll go ahead and take a break, and we'll finish up the chapter in the next video, so I will catch you over there.